welcome to DIY Therapy. As always, we start with a disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not designed to diagnose or treat. When beginning any exercise program, it should be reviewed and discussed with your medical professional prior to beginning. Information on this podcast is not designed to replace medical treatment. My name is Will. With me, as always, is Andy. What up?
Good morning.
How you doing?
What's a good word?
Bird is the word? Isn't that the song?
Bird is the word.
That's the song.
Like that.
That's the song, right?
I think so. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I get very confused these days in my old age.
Yeah, you're so old.
So anything new going on in your life there, Will?
Just trying to convince Henry that his birthday was Tuesday.
Over?
Yes.
Yeah.
And trying to convince him that despite the fact that we were going to see his grandparents this weekend, that is in fact not also his birthday.
Yeah, that's a real tough thing for little ones, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
4-year-olds struggle with the idea that it's not my birthday still.
Yeah. Is it birthday week, birthday month? What is it?
I mean, yeah.
I had, Ellie just had her birthday, she turned 7, and I was trying to explain to her because we were going to go and celebrate with her grandparents, her birthday and whatnot, and she was saying how it's 2 more days till her birthday, and I was trying to explain to her, no, it's actually 363 more days to your birthday. And it just blew her mind. She had no idea what she just looked at me. No, it was just my birthday. Yeah. 363 more days and will be your birthday again. Yeah, probably a bad conversation to have with a 7-year-old. So
Kids are smart. How do we ever make it out of that? I don't think I have, but that's just me.
I think my maturity level is about 9.
Yeah, after a certain point, my kids will definitely outgrow me, and it'll be sooner rather than later. No, yeah, that's what I mean.
All right.
I think we're going to
talk about today.
Let's talk about ergonomics.
Ergonomics.
It's like freakonomics.
Economics?
Yeah, freakonomics.
Now we're just putting adjectives in front of, or precursors in front of economics.
Sure.
Why not? All right, so ergonomics. This, let's see, it lies along the line of posture. It's a hot topic, obviously, in businesses trying to reduce pretty much workman's compensation type of cost for neck pain, back pain, etc. Maybe even carpal tunnel. But it really lies with what is posture, what is good posture, and that kind of starts off. So there's no perfect posture, correct?
There is no perfect posture, no. Everyone's just a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Whatever is right for you is not right for everyone else. So
I think it's important to also discuss then, there's this idea that poor posture actually causes low back pain or neck pain. That just has not been correctly defined in research yet. It doesn't necessarily say it's not correlated, but it certainly isn't. They haven't been able to actually find that cause yet. So it's important to note that it's not recognized that poor posture will cause low back pain. What's important to recognize is that if you have low back pain or neck pain, poor posture and or positioning can keep it around, and that's kind of a different twist on looking at it. So if you're suffering from neck or back pain or upper thoracic pain, upper back pain, then you may want to look at how you're positioning yourself at the workplace, specifically if you're spending 60, 70, 80% of your day on the computer, which we don't do, Will, but we deal with a lot of individuals who do.
Yes.
Engineers, accountants, receptionists, anybody who's really...
Anybody who works in a cubicle or anything like that.
Yeah, which is, quite a bit of people. So, one of the ways that ergonomics is trying to kind of lessen the costs on the economy and lessen the costs and expenses from a company is to, if anybody does have a complaint, you can always talk to your HR department and really have them probably come out and do an ergonomic assessment depending on the size of your company. If you're a smaller company, 20 people or less, you may not have a HR department that's capable of doing so or willing to spend the special money on a specialist to come out. And so larger companies, obviously, they're going to look a little bit deeper into it and probably either spend the cost, the money available, have somebody come out and look at your desk. But a lot of these specialists that are actually coming out and looking at your desks aren't necessarily looking at it to be unique to you. And that's, I think, one important point to make is that this is all still essentially triggered by whatever it is you're experiencing. You know, there's the textbook ergonomics of how one should sit, and we will talk about that. But it's still about what it is that's actually driving your symptoms. So some people, you know, if your low back is actually in a nice kind of upright position, that might actually make your symptoms worse. So it might be counterproductive to adjust a lumbar roll or a lumbar pressure to keep that low back in a better position. So also there's also some wiggle room in terms of, you know, what is it that's the best fit for you and what is it that really drives your symptoms. So you've got to be cognizant of that and aware of that as you're having that discussion with a specialist in that regard, or whether or not you're trying to really assess it on your own also.
Yeah. What are your specific goals? Is it to be able to sit longer, or is it to reduce pain? If it's to sit longer, that may not be necessarily a good goal. You should be able to get up and move around a bit, not necessarily sit for 5 hours and be without pain. Like, that's not exactly normal. You should be able to. Your body's built to move, so that's why it's in pain, because it doesn't want to be stationary for any particular amount of time.
Yeah, you know, and we know things from biomechanics, you know, of how the body should sit, but even the static positions in the perfect position isn't going to be effective for you, and you're still going to produce pain. So really, probably the number one tip for ergonomics, I would say, is every 45, 60 minutes, get up and go get a drink. Get up and go to the restroom. Go get a snack. Walk around the office. Something of that nature, right, Will?
Yeah. That's usually my advice to everybody is at least that amount of time. I mean, I can't imagine anyone not wanting to do that. I can't sit still more than 15 minutes.
Well, you're talking about two adults with ADHD, so
yeah, that's true.
You and I are both on the same page. Yeah, so if you're having difficulty with, kind of getting lost in your work too, there's other strategies that you can do to help kind of remind you, whether it's like a Post-it note on your computer screen that kind of catches your eye and reminds you to get up in a good position, or you could set phone timers these days with the smartphones.
Set a reminder. Yeah.
Yep. And I know that I'll sit down and do some work and get lost in some things for an hour and a half or so, and realize that I've been crouched over my laptop for way too long, and realize I've got a little bit of neck stiffness and pain, etc. So it's again, the body really just doesn't like static positions. So the number one tip from a posture ergonomic standpoint is to
move,
change positions.
Positions. We're going back to our old podcast, our old posture podcast.
But I guess we could probably go. What's that?
We're going backwards to our posture podcast. It's a callback.
Yeah, I know. So I guess we should probably kind of just start touching base on proper positioning with both keyboard and a desk and with a computer. So because we'll kind of touch a little bit later on if you've got a desk that can actually be adjustable to where you're standing. Some tips for that too. So. When we're looking at ergonomics, you're going to want to try to get a chair that actually adjusts in height, okay, up and down, because we want to make sure that our feet are going to be flat on the floor to begin with. If your chair is too tall and it doesn't adjust, you're going to want to actually get like a box or some type of footrest underneath you so that you can get your feet flat on the floor. When our feet aren't flat on the floor, what we'll tend to do is actually our tailbones will actually start to slide out and our back will round. and as our back rounds, our head will go and move extremely forward. So first thing is making sure that you try to get your chair at the right height. So we want the knees to be at a 90-degree angle. For all of our geometry friends out there, that's that right angle. So basically, like 4 corners of a square.
Well, it's only 1 corner of a square.
I hate you.
Get in line.
With a passion. So, essentially, we'll be at about 90 degrees at the knees there. And what we want to do is make sure that the tailbone is really wedged back into the back of the chair.
Yeah, I always tell people that the easiest way I always describe it is if you feel your sit bones, your bones on your butt, and you try to aim those.
Your sit bones.
Yeah, I've heard them described as that.
Very scientific.
Better than what the actual name is. If we actually spit out the name, then it'll be like shield tuberosities. What? Exactly. But if you aim those sit bones for the actual crease of the seat of the chair, between the back and the seat of the chair, and try to wedge those as far back as you can, it'll pretty much put you in the proper position.
Yes, it will. So getting those sit bones all the way back, we'll kind of set up the lumbar spine. Now, if you got some of these office chairs are going to actually have a space there, to where you only have kind of a contact point up on maybe like the mid back. Those are probably, in my opinion, pretty poor chairs. You're not going to have much support there in the lumbar spine. They're going to be sitting up more around like your shoulder blades or maybe a hair below it. You're going to want to try to see if you can get a different chair that will actually have a little bit more support and more contact point on your entire low back. If you have a chair that has an actual like lumbar support, you're going to want to try to push that out as far as possible. If it doesn't have any, you can still see if it is decent enough. You may not have to put a towel roll there, but if it isn't, if it's soft or if it's just really kind of a flat chair, then you may need to actually get like a lumbar support roll, or just take a towel, roll it up, put a piece of rubber band or a piece of tape around it to kind of keep it in place and have it
stay rolled
and keep it up. So that's really where you need that lumbar spine to be. And then if you've got arm rests on the chair, then you're going to want to try to make sure that your elbows are at 90 degrees also. So similar to the knees, those elbows are going to be at 90 degrees, and then you pull that chair up close to wherever your keyboard is so that your hands are resting even with your elbows. So that's kind of the ideal position in regards to elbows. And so the challenge becomes is if you raise your chair up too high, okay, get the hands at the right place with the keyboard, then your feet don't touch the ground. So that's where you might need that footrest to actually put underneath your feet so that you can make sure that your knees are at 90 and that your feet are supported so you don't let that back kind of slide out and round out. So that's where we need to be with that. Any comments on that, Will?
It's just basically, it's mostly just half the battle is getting your feet flat and getting your hips in the right position. A lot of the other stuff will kind of fall into place if you can get those two things kind of squared away.
It's finding that right combo. And unfortunately, like if you're working in an older office that doesn't have, if you're working in an office that has chairs from the 1990s and earlier, then you might be in trouble. Most newer chairs are going to have adjustable armrests, adjustable lumbar support, and the chair is going to be able to kind of sit up higher and lower based upon your height. So I think then the next really big piece then is getting you then close enough to the desk to where you can keep your head in a decent position so that you're not leaning in and looking at the monitor. Because that's where a lot of people will have that challenges in terms of trying to keep their head back. And so people get headaches, people get neck aches, people get strained eyes. all when they're trying to lean forward or trying to see the computer screen, and getting that head way in front of them because they're kind of zoned in on whatever work they're doing, and squinting and or leaning forward. So that's the other thing that needs to be kind of monitored. And some people will actually, and I've suggested this many times in the clinic, to actually bring the computer monitor much closer. So instead of trying to bring your body closer to the screen, bring the computer monitor closer to you, so that you're not leaning in and squinting and trying to read or whatever you're doing.
I heard somebody who, it was actually pretty. It's basic, but it's also like, I'd never heard it described this way, where the computer works for you, not you work for the computer. So if the computer is too far away, move the computer. You don't need to move closer to it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Great little saying there. And really good advice. It's about getting to where you can position yourself on a regular basis, where your body is going to be comfortable instead of straining it. We all get caught up in our work. So if we're putting our body in a strainful position for too long, it's going to start talking to us. So we need to make sure that we're staying in a good upright position where we're keeping minimal stress on the joints and on the neck and on the low back. So, but that's really, ergonomics 101 right there.
I mean, there's also,
terribly complicated.
I mean, there's, things where you can get into like wrist positions and with the mouse and the keyboards and things like that to try to avoid repetitive injuries that could cause the cubital tunnel, or not cubital tunnel, but carpal tunnel. And another thing to avoid was, I've heard people complain about pain from their shoulder, going down their arm, and it's probably just related to the forward head. If so, a lot of that isn't necessarily where your arm is in space, it's where your head is in space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, making sure that head is backwards, like you said, making that computer screen work for you, put it in a position that's going to be better for you. So, but that's ergonomics probably in a
very small nutshell.
Yeah, in a nutshell, and for the seated desk. So I think one of the things that's important to recognize too is if you work for a larger company, a lot of people will request a standing desk and think that really just kind of solves all the problem. It is a solution because it typically standing desks can both raise and lower, so you can kind of split your time between seated and standing. But what is important is still how you're positioning your low back, your arms, your wrists, elbows, neck, all in that standing position. So if you're standing in a really crummy position where you're not paying attention to your wrists and or your elbows at 90 and 90, and you're leaning over the desk, putting strain on the back, or leaning forward with the forward head, putting strain on the neck, then it's not.
Yeah, you're back to square one.
Yeah. So you still have to make sure that you're getting yourself up in a good position, and making sure everything's in those kind of nice angles that we've discussed. So I think one of the things that people don't realize is that just because you get a standing desk, it's not going to just solve all the problems. You have to still be aware of your posture and continue to change some of those positions regularly.
Yeah, it's part of it is like we talked about before is literally just moving, just not staying in a specific position for too long, just trying to be almost fidgety, not quite fidgety, but
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think that's why the low back or the standing tables are really nice, is because you can alter from that seated to standing.
Yeah.
But you still have to make sure you're monitoring some of those right angles and whatnot, because if you're just changing from seated to standing, but your head's still in the same position over and over again, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. That's kind of all of it in a nutshell. That's not. I don't know.
Oh, this is me. I'm in a nutshell. Oh. Stupid. Mike Myers.
We're having some connection issues.
Yeah, but it's Mike Myers. Yeah, it's Mike Myers. It's Yeah, baby. Oh, God.
You look like you're having convulsions on my Skype screen here.
Because I am.
You there? Okay, good. Glad we got that on a recording.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say we'd go back and edit that, but we won't.
Nope.
No. Anything else?
Nah. I know you're busy. You got house things to deal with since you're moving.
Yeah, someone yesterday told us that The Walking Dead got put onto Netflix the last season, and I'm itching to kind of check it out. That was the first season I haven't watched live, so.
Have they talked about how the dead are not degraded after 7 years?
I think they actually went through, like, if you look at some of like the behind the scene footage, that they've actually gone into that a little bit, that they have made them more degrading, like the tissue and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. We talked about this a little bit about the whole Walking Dead fans and everything like that, and boy, that's a hard show to just keep going.
No one I've ever talked to seems to like it, but they can't stop watching it.
Yeah. Well, the first 2, 3, maybe even 4th season were really good, and then it just kind of keeps getting drawn out, and it's kind of the same story. The reason why the show I think I was drawn to it so quickly was, though, it was similar to like Game of Thrones, where there's actually things at stake.
Yeah, people could die.
People died that you actually invested time and cared about. Unlike a lot of other stories that are out there that the main characters are they're certainly going to live and survive till the end, and you never really worry about what's going to happen, just how it's going to happen. So yeah, but that's I got off the kick last year, so I'll have to see if I can. I'll have to see what this last season's about. I'll give a review.
All right. Well, that's all I got. I haven't watched anything new. I've been lame.
You're boring. All right. Well, why don't you send us off with our disclaimer there, buddy?
All right.
You can contact us at. What are some of our new contacts?
Our contacts are: you can tweet at us at DIY Therapy, and you can email us at DIYtherapy206@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook group that I will link in the description that you can join. And if you have any ideas, or questions or comments about any of this stuff, you can just we would love to know. Any sort of participation or comments or hate mail. I'll take hate mail at this point.
Someone pretend like you're listening. Please.
All right.
You don't have to like us.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not designed to diagnose or treat. When beginning any exercise program, it should be reviewed and discussed with your medical professional prior to beginning. Information on this podcast is not designed to replace medical treatment. Remember, treat yourself.